Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Mai-Coh, yes, a member of our science team. This is always excellent to see you make your way into the Fox Den for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. This is going to be epic as always, yet please allow me to feed. Absolutely delicious, and thank you for releasing my shackles, Mai-Coh, and setting me free. Just remember, there are things that go bump in the night that are much worse than anything we can ever speak of. Without further ado, it is time for the Midnight Society to take a walk into the darkness.
Blow, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, leaves reborn, fury rise, health ignites, burdens raise, endless nights.
When I looked into the eyes of this Dogman, there was nothing. This thing was an apex predator.
Milk road, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, beast reborn, fury rise, endless nights.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. This is the home and the stomping ground of the Midnight Society. Once again, we sit around the late night fire and burn the timber in an attempt to figure out what is occurring globally, but specifically in the United States with missing people and unknown canine sightings. Tonight, we again have Mai-Coh, part of the science team with the North American Dogman Project. Yes, she has been extremely busy, but will also be popping in again here in the future. So she will be a reoccurring host. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Star Fox. I sure appreciate it. I'm glad to be here with you tonight.
Heck yeah, my friend. It's been definitely pretty busy on both ends, but you know how it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
Sometimes opportunity presents itself and you got to make sure to be able to gather it. You can never really tell. I mean, like
Yep.
today, I got 3 podcasts that were presented to me, which is great. But honestly, in a perfect world, you'd like to spread them out a little bit more, but that's not
Right.
how it works sometimes.
Yeah. I sure appreciate you fitting me in. It's like when I get that child free time, I want to make the most of it.
Nah, you're one of my really good friends, so I always got time for you, my friend. I
Thank
literally,
you.
when you texted me, just rolled up out of my casket, more or less. So.
Hey, I sure appreciate it. Hey, that's awesome. So I am super excited today. If it's okay with you, I would love to get rolling. I want to talk about ghosts. Not really ghosts like we think of, like supernatural type of ghosts, though. I'm actually wanting to do this from a science perspective. So I want to talk about ghosts of evolution and ghosts of the Ice Age and how this could relate to the Dogman phenomenon.
Beautiful stuff, my friend. Before you dive into that, if you'd like to give yourself a plug and tell the audience what you do, because
Ah,
everyone that does tune in consistently should know I introduce my guests, but I've had to
well,
reiterate this a few times because apparently on one of my short videos, somebody was like, "You don't introduce your guests." And it's like, yo, you're watching a 1-minute video of a 36-minute segment. So, yeah, of course, I'm not going to play the segment of my guest introducing themselves. If you click on
yeah,
the link, you see that. But yeah, definitely introduce yourself, give
right.
yourself a plug, and tell everyone what you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm Mai-Coh and I live in Tennessee. I am I'm fond of paleontology, caving. I've come on here before and talked about, teleological sciences and things and, caving and how that could relate to cryptids and the like. And I do enjoy creating like reconstructions of prehistoric creatures, extinct animals, things that are no more. And I absolutely love finding the threads of how ancient history that is no longer with us today still is all around us, actually, like the echoes of it or the traces of it right under our feet, or even growing, on our city streets, in the landscaping or in the forest. It's very fascinating to me. So I'm super excited to always talk about that kind of thing.
That's great stuff right there, my friend. And before I throw you the mic back, actually, Heather and Aaron from Small Town Monsters, as well as the Wendigo guy, Ryan Tremblay, we were actually diving into this a little bit in regards of, I mean, if you're able to have, say, a spiritual type manifestation where it's a recollection of energy, meaning someone had a good time at a party or something. I mean, if those residual type hauntings supposedly occur. Again, I don't really specialize in any of that stuff, but I'm aware of it. I would assume there would have to be the same type of residual haunting with animals as well, meaning like, spiritual aspects. Like if an animal is supposed to live 25, 30 years in the wild and it has pups or something like that, and then it's hit by a car, same kind of thing. And we think, like, for example, I'm going to butcher the hell out of this, unfortunately, the Shakawaran from like Canada up in the Nahanni
Right.
Valley is reported to basically be like a hyena. And in those reports, these natives would shoot at this hyena looking thing with bows and arrows and muskets, but it would cause no damage. But they would find the footprints and everything. But then their dogs were being found completely ripped apart, and they would dub this thing the dog eater. So
Hmm.
obviously something physical was ripping apart the dogs, crushing the head, and doing basically, type of behavior that is very entwined with hyenas, crushing the skull and such. And yeah, so we think that maybe when they were shooting at that thing and not causing damage, yeah, it was the, potentially a spirit of something that existed at one point in time, but then the actual physical, decapitation of their dogs and such is actually maybe a real cave hyena or dire wolf or something that is still kicking around.
Isn't that wild? Absolutely. That gets me thinking about something local to me, a local cryptid. It has the silliest name, the Pity Pat. That's named after the pity pat sound of it following you on the road. But it's one that it sometimes manifests as like a ride along where it jumps in the passenger seat or on top of a car. Back in the 1800s, it would sometimes jump on the back of a horse and spook them, or jump on the carriage, and it would be really, really heavy seeming. It sometimes bangs into the sides of cars but never leaves a mark. People have described it. Now, that whole area has, this is like Sale Creek, northern Hamilton County, Tennessee, a lot of high strangeness in the area. People have reported various things. I have been there, I haven't seen anything, but I also don't really go looking for trouble. um, so there's humanoid type of apparitions, and then there's also part of the pity pat story is like it's maybe a really big cat, but it's like blacker than black shadow. There's often glowing green eyes, and it's always like, from what I understand, like when it's like cat-like, it's typically quadrupedal. Anyway, this thing has been haunting the area and scaring travelers in that area since at least the 1800s, since white settlers got to the area. And I've always wondered, like, what is that thing? People are having experiences. What if it was some sort of echo of some prehistoric cat creature? The actual species that we have now that are alive in the world are vastly outnumbered by the numbers of extinct species that we had. And like, I'm not just talking dinosaurs, but like Ice Age or before the Ice Age. There was, we have like, after the dinosaurs, there's like 66 million years worth of mammals doing stuff. And that could be, like, there have been so many big cat species. That's part of what got me into paleontology, because I was always cat obsessed. And it turns out there are so many kinds of cats that are actually extinct. We're not just talking Smilodon, we're talking Xenosmilus, we're talking Homotherium, which is a whole other genus similar to Smilodon. We're talking ones that most people probably haven't heard of that are from all over the world. It's so fascinating. And some of them are so obscure you can't even find paleo art of them. Dozens, maybe 100 species, maybe more. There's so many, and they're always discovering more. Like, oh, this genus now has another one. So What if the echoes remain sometimes? I don't know. That's the kind of ghost I wasn't really planning on talking about today, but you know what? It kind of applies, because if these energy echoes can exist still, I'm with you, Star Fox. It's not really my specialty, but it would make more sense than, I don't know, one of this creature still existing and there only being one somehow millions of years later. I don't know. It does seem like human ghosts, it seems to be like there's a recency bias, right? Ghost stories. I don't like, again, that's not my forte. I don't really have ghost story type experiences myself. But it does seem like as things get more and more into the distant past, it's rarer and rarer that there's still energy kicking around. So it makes me wonder if it sort of dissipates, or things finally move on, or the echoes kind of just sort of go away eventually. But there's nothing stopping, I don't know, sightings from happening. Some people, there have been reports of dinosaur sightings and pterosaur sightings, and some people think that maybe the Thunderbird sightings that people have are conflated with that, or mixed up with that, and maybe it's the same thing. I don't know. That's that's speculation. That's not the science side, but it sure is interesting. Sure is interesting.
Great stuff right there. And now, before I toss you the mic back to dive into some more stuff, it's like with the cynocephali. I mean, we believe that they are the Dogmen, the origins of it. And same thing, I mean, they could be residual hauntings as well. So, I mean, yes, cynocephali in our eyes do exist, but also they could be haunting as well, meaning if someone could see a cynocephali, but maybe it's a smoky kind of figure because it's actually like the spirit of one. It's just interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. I concur. Um, so when it comes to evolutionary ghosts, where it's not a spectral or supernatural thing, where it's actually a physical thing, and ghost is like not literally a ghost here, there are some options. There are some things that any of us could probably see. The first one I'm going to get into is one that probably everyone has seen before and knows about. It's pretty epic because it's really the history of it goes so far back. Ginkgo trees, Ginkgo biloba. So, those are the trees that have those fan-shaped leaves, right? And they're nice and green, and like all year, they're nice and green. And then in the fall, like really abruptly, typically, suddenly the whole tree will be like pure gold, like beautiful yellow fan-shaped leaves. They're very, very commonly planted in cities along the roads and stuff, or like outside, like I know locally to me, there's a few outside the library downtown. They're really pretty. Parking lots, Target parking lot has them close to me. Like they're everywhere. This thing has this deep history though, which is so fascinating. They also, you may notice, they are male and female. The trees come in male and female. Not all trees do, but these do. They are gymnosperms, which means the seeds are not really true fruits. But they do have their seeds are like fruits, and they smell disgusting. If you've ever walked under a ginkgo tree in the fall, it's like the glorious golden light of, filtering through the ginkgo leaves. But if it's a female tree, you're probably also assaulted by the smell that can be described as like a cross between vomit and rotting meat. It is vile. It is vile. That's their little seeds. They have this squishy exterior, and then on the inside there's like a little hard, almost like a nut, right? And the outer casing of these ginkgo seeds, it's acidic. And one year I decided, I got the bright idea, I'm going to grow ginkgo. I love them because they're so cool. And you have to have gloves to handle these things, which I did, because they can give you like a rash on your hands from handling it, because it's just so acidic. It's nasty. It's not really something that most of us would want to tangle with. But ginkgos, the actual species of like Ginkgo biloba, the species itself is incredibly old compared to most species of tree or anything. The species itself is millions of years old, most likely. It may go back to dinosaur times, the actual species, not just the genus. Now, within the genus, there used to be lots of different ginkgos. Now we just have the one. But if you go back in the fossil record, and I'm talking North America, I'm talking China, I'm talking, I think, Europe, Eurasia, like all over the world, there are these fossils of the ginkgo trees, and it looks literally the same. Like in the same years that T-Rex roamed around North America, You can find, if you have, find some nice fossils where it's leaves that are, that are preserved. The ginkgo leaves look literally the same as the ones you're going to see like by the library downtown. They are virtually unchanged, which is so cool. So cool. Talk about a living fossil, right? And there they are. Why, if it's working for them, why mess with it? But the puzzle with ginkgo, like, who are the seeds for? Who are those for? Because now, like these days, they aren't really loved and really deeply enjoyed by anything. Squirrels will eat squirrels will eat the seeds if they're separated from the nasty outer covering sometimes, but they won't handle the nasty fleshy seeds that are like as they fall from the tree, because they smell like vomit and rotting flesh and horrible nastiness, and it's just gross. And it might burn their little paws, right? You have a pet squirrel. They're quite delicate, and of course they're also tough, but they're not going to want to touch something that's going to burn them. Like, they're smarter than that. So squirrels and chipmunks and stuff, they don't usually go after them very much. Birds don't seem to love them. It's really, really weird. So there's been a lot of speculation. What was supposed to eat them? What was supposed to eat the ginkgo seeds? And people are like, well, I mean, let's roll back the clock. What was around when these things evolved, like in, early dinosaur times, like not Cretaceous, but like Jurassic, maybe Triassic stuff, like old stuff back then. And people are like, well, maybe it was like large herbivorous dinosaurs. And maybe it was. And I've also read other speculation that herbivores today won't touch it because it smells nasty. The only things that you'll really see eating these are like raccoons, and other scavengers will sometimes eat the seeds and be attracted to the smell and like mess with it, which is interesting. And what I'm talking about here with the ginkgo, I read about, there's a book actually called The Ghosts of Evolution, and it's very interesting. It goes very much in detail about what I'm talking about today. So these are not my ideas, but it's very cool. It's by Connie Barlow. Anyway, I have it in front of me right now. It's a good book, very fascinating. It goes into more than I could possibly cover today. So actually, the other speculation is like, what if it wasn't the herbivores eating the fruit? What if this was actually designed to be eaten by little carnivorous dinosaurs, like velociraptors and that kind of thing? Something big like a T-Rex is not going to bother with it, but something small. And I mean, a lot of the velociraptor species, because of movies like Jurassic Park, we vastly overestimate how big they were. We think they're like Utah raptor, but really they were like the size, most velociraptors were like the size of turkeys, okay? Like wild turkeys, you know what I'm saying? So they were pretty small. So they would mess around, they would eat little stuff. They may have eaten the ginkgo seed, small little dinosaurs that were cool eating like meat. That's possibly the original partner of the ginkgo tree, but we don't know. We don't know for sure because we weren't there. And until we find fossilized ginkgo seeds, inside of a well-preserved dinosaur skeleton, it's going to be pretty hard to know for sure. The next ghost that you may or may not be familiar with, but is all around us. This one is a little bit more recent. So we're talking like Ice Age. Osage orange. It's also known as horse apple or road apple sometimes. I mean, anyway, there's different names for it. They are not actual oranges. They're not citruses. From a distance, they look kind of like a green orange, but they are not edible to humans, okay? They are pretty tough. I will send in some photos I have of them to StarFox to throw up on the video as illustration. But they grow all along, like along roadsides, along pastures. When they're young and bushy, they can be pretty thorny, so they can make pretty good hedges, fences, basically. And they actually used to be very rare. Another name for this kind of tree is like the bow tree, like bow and arrow. They were highly coveted because they're very, very, like, the wood is very, very strong, but it's also very flexible. So it's not brittle and snapping, and it's not, and it's not like floppy and easily twisted. Like it will hold its shape, but it's perfect for bows. And it was actually very, very rare for a while. Like, it spread more when settlers came and they realized it could make good fences and hedgerows, because for a while it was very much confined to a small area, despite the fossil record showing it had been all over North America. And the reason there was not much of it left was because, again, like the evolutionary partners of the Osage orange had gone extinct. And it was probably large megafauna of the Ice Age, and even before that, when it evolved, like like in the Miocene and stuff. So we're talking about like brontotheres. We're talking about elephant relatives like mammoths and mastodons. And actually rhinos like them. If you like, they will eat them. If you actually feed one to a rhino, it will eat it. It has no problem. These Osage oranges, they're eaten by squirrels today, but the squirrel basically just breaks open the ball and picks out the seeds, and they don't usually spread them very far. So it's better than nothing. But again, it does better when it passes through the gut of something, and it likes to be, one would think it's actually meant to be carried far instead of just a few feet away from the parent tree, because then what's the point? So that one is super interesting. That one is everywhere again. It's not everywhere like an oak tree or a hickory that we're used to seeing, or a pine tree, but you'll see them sometimes. It looks almost like a bright greenish yellowish softball. The fruit is really kind of weird looking. And like I said, they aren't, it's not like they're poisonous. They're just not really edible. Like inside it's very fibrous and stringy and weird. Also, they have like a sticky sap on the outside that can irritate your skin. It's never bothered me. I've picked them up. My kids have played with them and thrown them at each other's heads, and it's fine. But some people are kind of allergic to it, like poison ivy. It's not the same as poison ivy, though. Anyway, so that's an interesting one. And so again, so that was probably the mammoths and the mastodons, and also giant ground sloths that may have eaten that one. Let's see here. I'm going to hit two more of these that you guys might be familiar with. Avocados. So avocado seeds are way too large for most modern animals to swallow and disperse, right? Like nobody's going to swallow an avocado seed and be okay. They're made for something with a very large gullet. What could it have been? Well, some sort of extinct megafauna, right? Giant sloths, gomphotheres, which were like elephant-like mammals. They looked fairly ridiculous if you see a picture of them. They have like big old jaws. Anyway, they would eat them probably. And they could eat the entire fruit whole and then, deposit the seed in their dung. So now humans are the primary thing that disperses avocados and keeps them alive. We have Native Americans to thank for, in Central South America, for keeping these things alive and growing them and continuing to cultivate them. So that's a really neat one. Another one. Okay. Oh, and by the way, the original ones were probably, again, the sloths, the gomphotheres. Another one is very much for fall pumpkin spice season, gourds and squashes. So did you know that the original version of gourds that we have, they're an American thing, but they're very bitter, the wild like desert gourds. They aren't very tasty. They were cultivated, again, by Native Americans, into the various varieties that we have. Some are sweet, some are savory, pumpkins, gourds, like butternut squash, all this stuff. The original version, though, was, again, probably designed to be eaten whole by something. And that something was most likely a large Pleistocene herbivore, like a mammoth, like a mastodon, something that could possibly scoop it off the ground with its trunk and pop it in its mouth, and could disperse them widely. There are still patches of like wild gourds around today, but there are not very many of them. And of course, humans have spread them around quite a bit. So it's interesting to think, though, like the connection between mammoths and mastodons and something like pumpkins. Like for so many years, for millennia, for thousands of years, maybe millions of years, those gourds relied on mammoths and mastodons, the big giant hairy elephants of North America, to spread them. And that was their food. And, there's other things that will eat on them, but not that many things can actually crush a melon and just eat it, like straight up eat it. And so now, we have this huge variety of delicious stuff from gourds. Pumpkin pie spice doesn't really have pumpkins in it, but I like the stuff that actually has pumpkin. Or, anything squashes, like all that stuff that used to be food for elephants, basically the mammoths, the mastodons, possibly the Gomphotheres. Like it's incredible. Like these things, they're commonplace. They're everywhere, but they really wouldn't exist today without being cultivated by us because or they would be rare and maybe sort of languishing because they are, they're basically ghosts of evolution. They're ghosts of the ice age. They are no longer, they're no longer with their partner that they would always, that was actually helping them. Another one, and this is like the opposite kind of relationship. I've been talking about plants and plant relationships and cooperative, like this thing was made to be eaten by this. Well, here's something that did not want to be eaten by something else. We talk about, you've probably heard of evolutionary arms races, right? Where like, the thing doesn't want to be eaten by something. So it evolves to be, it evolves toxins. Like that's how we get like, coffee, actually, caffeine. That's supposed to be a toxin to keep bugs from eating it, or whatever. And there's all these different things where things don't want to be eaten, so they evolve, and something else might evolve to be, to catch up with it. Like, okay, we have the pronghorn of North America. Some people call them pronghorn antelope. Technically, they're not an antelope, but everybody's going to know what you're talking about if you say pronghorn antelope. Anyway, they have a long history going back in North America here. And they are the second fastest land animal. They are only slower than cheetahs, like only cheetahs of Africa. Now, why? That doesn't make any sense because nothing here is fast enough to catch a pronghorn except a bullet, but they did not evolve with bullets. Like we're talking, okay, some things will eat the babies of them before they get fast. But once they're grown, they can outrun anything. The pumas, they can never catch them, okay? Bears, absolutely not. Coyotes, wolves, they don't stand a chance. These things are super fast. It turns out they were eaten by a big cat that was very much like a cheetah, known as the American cheetah. They're more closely related to cougars because, they're an American cat. We don't know how fast they were, but by their build and like they're almost identical, convergent evolution, like they're almost identical to cheetahs. They had the enlarged, breathing passageways. They had the limbs. They had everything. Their whole body was made for speed. So they were probably very similar to the cheetahs that we have in Africa today. And now the American cheetah is extinct. They're gone. So the pronghorn, they're still running today. They're still super fast because, when the thing went extinct, when the cheetah went extinct, maybe, 10, 15,000 years ago, I mean, evolutionarily, that's the blink of an eye. That's not enough time for the pronghorn to say, oh, well, we shouldn't be so fast. We should get slow. Not that they actually consciously say that, but the trade-offs for being fast, there's no reason for them to get slower. Like they're fine. So they're just still fast. They're essentially running from ghosts. They're not, their predator is not here anymore. It's very fascinating. So those are some examples of ghosts of evolution where, there's a something that was extinct and something that's still here. The last thing I want to talk about, though, and this is something where I can sort of bring this in and relate it to the Dogman phenomenon. A lot of us have heard about the coelacanth, which is that fish that they found fossils of. They had lots of fossils of it, and they thought this thing has been extinct for a really long time, until suddenly it turns up in a fish market, and they realize this thing is still alive. And that was a big deal. It was amazing that this thing was still around, and somehow we didn't realize. We found the fossils before we found the thing. Okay, that's amazing, and that was a big deal. Most people have heard of that. What people don't realize, there are other things where that has happened. There's even a species of canid, a wild dog, where that has happened. So it's a pretty obscure species. Not many people know about them. But bush dogs, those are from South America, and they have a very interesting history that way because they were first discovered as fossils in the 1800s. And they were found in caves, and these were described as a species. They were given the name Spiothos venaticus. They were named after being found in a cave, I guess. And here they are, like they were thought for many years, this thing is just, it once lived here, it's not here anymore. And then it turns up alive. And I I have tried to find what exact year they were discovered alive, but it looks like it might not have been until the 1900s that they were found to be alive. It certainly wasn't until, the 20th century that they were actually researched and fully, like more fully understood to be a living creature. This didn't seem to hit the news the way the coelacanth did, and I'm not sure why, but it was possibly because it was much more of an obscure fossil to begin with. Um, but these things, they're not even endangered, okay? They're near threatened. So, they're not like common and like everywhere, but they are extremely elusive. And this is just a normal dog, wild dog. Now they look adorable, okay? They look like a corgi that kind of got crossed with maybe a bear. They are corgi size, corgi shaped, except they have like little rounded ears, more like a bear, and they're kind of like brownish with sort of black undersides and kind of a short, nubby tail. They are super cute. But it is so rare to catch these things, even like on a trail camera. And they're not lone, solitary creatures either. They run in packs of like 10 to 12 individuals typically. They mate for life, they breed year round. They hunt everything from like tapirs, they even hunt capybaras. They'll catch whatever they got to. They're hyper carnivorous. Their nearest relative is the maned wolf, which looks like a fox on stilts. It also lives in South America, and that thing, I think that will even eat fruit sometimes. It will eat meat as well, and it will hunt, but it is not a hyper carnivore. But the bush dogs, as adorable as they are hyper carnivores. I was reading something. It took like 9,000 trail cam hours for them to get any pictures of these things at all, and like they had them set up for months or maybe even years in this one spot, and like they finally got a picture of a pack of these things, and in the time it took to get that picture, like they got like 13 or 14 pictures of jaguars, which are supposed to be super elusive. Like these things are really, really shy, and they don't get around trail cams much for some reason. There's no evidence of them being like obscenely unnaturally smart. They just don't show up on trail cams very much for whatever reason. So that is really interesting to me, because we do talk a lot about like what could Dogman have come from, or what could be the origin of these things, and how could, and a lot of people, of course, very much poo-poo the idea that something could exist and not be detected yet by science. That there could be something out there still, especially a large mammal that could be out there and we don't officially know. Now, I know it's it's the 21st century, not the 1800s anymore. And we have explored a lot, but there's a lot that we don't know, and the world is stranger than we think. And the fact that somebody was like, we were able to completely miss that these bush dogs were still alive this whole time is mind blowing to me. Oh, another thing about bush dogs is they're highly aquatic. They like to like swim and travel like in rivers and creeks. That may be one way they're evading detection on cameras. Sound familiar? These things are like, they're around, and like I said, they aren't rare to the point of even being, considered endangered. They're not as rare as, say, a jaguar. They're around, but they're just very, very hard to see. Most people never see them, even if they live where they live. And they're out there. So what else could be out there? Well, like, could something else have survived? Because they were looking at like ice age, level fossils of these bush dogs. Is there anything else that might still be hanging on from the ice age? We don't know, but we know people are seeing something out there. Like, this phenomenon is not coming from nothing. And there could be something hanging on. Imagine if something was not only like smart and elusive, but like super smart. Maybe not as smart as a person, but smart enough to know to stay away and to know to avoid people and to know to avoid detection. What if it had a few capabilities that we don't really understand? What if it had opposable thumbs like a raccoon? We don't know where these things come from, but we can speculate, and we can draw some connections and some parallels here. And maybe it's not that impossible. Maybe it's not as impossible as most people think, for something to still be hanging on and lingering somewhere, especially if it knows how to hide and make dens, caves, using streams, rivers for travel. There are possibilities. There are a lot of wild areas around still. And yes, most of the eastern half of the United States has been logged at some point, but that doesn't mean it was all logged at the same time. There's always been stands of wilderness. There's always been somewhere to hide. So that's kind of my spiel. The ghost of evolution, occasionally something turns up to still be alive and not a ghost after all.
That is great stuff, my friend. And before I let you get back to what you're doing, thanks for shoving some more knowledge into my brain, because I'm always about learning stuff and geeking out. And I actually got a couple things to touch base on real quick. So just
Yay.
with being elusive, I mean, look at like gorillas in the mist. Okay, it took those gorillas almost, I believe, a couple years before they ever showed themselves. The other individual in the gorillas in the mist that I originally, made the reference to, she went over for like poaching and stuff. And there's actually a movie about it. I believe Sigourney Weaver was in it, and they actually end up unaliving her because she's trying to stop like the trade of hands and body parts of like the gorillas. But
Ooh.
yeah, it took a very long time for those gorillas to show themselves to her, to actually both of them, which is really interesting. And on a funny note, I'm a huge vegetable person. I do eat some meat, but man, I love my veggies, but I cannot really stand squash or anything like along the lines of that stuff. Like, man, I love asparagus, I love spinach, I love kale, man, like cucumbers. Like I said, I mean, summer squash and zucchini is pretty good, but I'm talking about like just the yellow squash and like turnip and stuff. It's definitely not my swag for sure. And also, too, on another funny note, just about like the smell of the tree you were talking about. I just figured you'd get a kick out of this real quick before I let you go. The other day, I gave my squirrel a bath, and she loves to swim around the bathtub, which is hilarious.
Oh, it's adorable.
Yes. So the thing is, though, obviously, I mean, she doesn't really have a smell. So picture like a cat. They don't really have a smell. I mean, dogs, when they get wet and stuff, have a smell, but she doesn't really smell. But she goes in and outside. So I like to make sure that she doesn't have mites on her, or, any sort of fleas that I can see, or ticks or anything. So yeah, I give her baths. Well, the other day I put on what the heck was it? It was one of my conditioners. It's really good quality stuff and shampoo. As soon as I let her back outside, I'll have to send you the video. She literally runs into a pile of sand and just takes a big old dirt bath for like 10 minutes after I just cleaned her.
She was like, "That's disgusting. I smell like a human. Ew."
Yeah, pretty much. So that's why I figured you get a kick out of that.
That's really funny.
She's like, "Yo, dude, like, what the heck is this like trashy stuff? I'm going outside to take a big old dirt bath," and I'm like, "Yo, man, like, what the hell is the point of this?"
Yeah, it's like after petting my cat, and then she like licks all the spots where I touched her. Like, oh, gross! Gotta get that human smell off me.
Exactly. So I just
Thanks.
figured you get like a kick up out of that. But I will
hilarious.
definitely send you that video later so you can get a chuckle. But I do
Sure thing.
again appreciate you popping in and hanging out with us tonight, because you are an extremely busy individual, and definitely let me know as soon as you get some more time, and I will always schedule you in. And within the next couple days, I should be able to get this episode out. So
Awesome. Very cool.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share it. Just make sure to feed the algorithm, and I will see you very soon.